Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and I've been a tax attorney for a little over 20 years, and here's the number one mistake that I've noticed over the years that I've seen repeatedly, especially with folks that are struggling. And I call it the losing loop, and I'll explain how you get in it, and more importantly, how you can break that cycle. So let's kind of dive into this thing. I want to explain it with 4 boxes. Boxes are actually really simple. Number 1 is your income box. Number 2 is your expense box, which is money coming in, money going out. Real simple. You could actually just grab your bank statements every month and your credit card statements, and we could actually do real rough calculations that are going to get you where you need to be. Then you have your balance sheet, which is your assets and your liabilities. Liabilities are things like your credit card. Assets, we'll use what a bank will call an asset, which is anything of value. Even your car. Technically, I don't like to call it an asset because it doesn't make you any money, but they'll call it an asset. At the end of the day, we'll explain why we get into trouble as we go through how these numbers interact. So generally speaking, you're supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to be having your income come to pay your expenses, and then extra go down here. And you're supposed to be paying and buying assets. What happens when somebody enters the losing loop is they don't have enough to cover their expenses. They're spending more as expenses than they have coming in an income. So this doesn't happen. And then they end up using a liability like a credit card to start paying for those expenses. And that is the losing loop, because all of a sudden your income starts to go down here to pay this off, and you're in a debt cycle where you're paying off your debt, your mortgage, your car payment, all these things, and your credit card bills. The next thing you know, you feel like you're drowning, you feel like you're being suffocated. That might be a familiar feeling for some of you guys who are in that, going, why does it feel like I'm on a hamster wheel and I'm working my katush off for somebody else, and it's just to cover these liabilities? And chances are you've caught yourself in the losing loop, and usually that equals financial pain. If you don't correct it, it's going to end up in bankruptcy at some point, as we see repeatedly when we have these recessions, where people who are on that in this area, all of a sudden they're like, oh, interest rates start jacking up, they get into a lot of pain, the cost of things goes up, inflation raises and really takes a bite out of them. And the next thing you know, they're working their butts off just to cover these liabilities down here. They have no assets, and they're barely making ends meet to cover those expenses. So what's the big mistake that people are hitting? It really is this little guy right here. If you're having to use liabilities to cover your expenses, we need to cut that. And there's 2 ways to cut that. If you go to Dave Ramsey, he's going to tell you to live off of rice and beans, right? And I think he does that a little bit in jest. Brilliant guy. But he's going to focus on the expenses. He's going to say, you need to cut those expenses. You don't need to go to Starbucks. You don't need to have a nice car, blah, blah, blah. The other route would be to increase your income. Now, I tend to be in this category. The reason I'm in this category is because I have an infinite amount of income that I can create. I can be making $1 million a day, $1 billion a day, whatever it is, it's limitless. Whereas my expenses, there's only so much I can cut. Okay, I no longer go out to eat. I get a different car. I still have the cost of having to drive to work and things like that. Maybe I sell my car and I'm taking the bus. I still have expenses, right? I can't go below 0. I'm going to have expenses that I have to pay on. So there's a limit to what I'm able to cut. And I don't want to be miserable. I remember when I was in college, a Starbucks was like a treat. I don't know about you guys. Sometimes those little treats on a daily basis, you need them. Your head down, you're grinding. I was poor, didn't have much money, and it was $1.15 to buy a cup of Starbucks, and it was a reprieve. I remember going to law school. I was in downtown Tacoma, and there was a Starbucks. You go in there, and what I would do with the Starbucks is I would double cup it, and then I would come back with the extra cup for a refill later in the afternoon. So I could actually get 2 Starbucks a day that way. Did that at the airport too. But That's your little reprieve. I'm never going to tell somebody, get rid of your reprieve. What I am going to say is, if that is your little, hey, that's my vice, so be it. We just want to keep it, keep it within a proportionality. And that proportionality really needs to be, I need to live off of 70%. The biggest mistake people make is they do not know their numbers. They do not know what their income is after taxes. They do not know what their expenses are, period. They don't even like to look. And I would say, give yourself rough ideas, go to your bank account, figure out how much is your take home of all your activities, and then how much is being spent. And if you are not living off of 70%, work your tail to get there. And there's a reason why. Number one, you need to be able to invest for the future. You need to be investing money, period. People say, should I pay off my debt first? No, you need to be doing both. And so when I do 70%, I'm saying live off of 70%. I know some of you guys are going to be a little bit higher than that. Like, we want to give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room to where we don't just end up on the street, right? But the 70-30 rule that we follow here is generally live off of 70%, give away 10%. And I know some of you guys are like, there's no way I can give away. Okay, then give away time. And get it. I was in college and I didn't have any money either. And I could not give money to charity. It is one of those weird life principles, though. Like, you will get it back 10 times over if you're able to actually be a giver. But if you don't have the money to give, then give the time. So I drove a little forklift for Northwest Harvest and things like that. Like, you can give time, go out, donate time, just be generous to people, but just figure about 10% of value, right? If that's how you have to do it. But we want to actually have that as part of our budget. So live off of 70, give 10%. Pay off your debts. In other words, start paying down these liabilities, extra payments every month with 10%. So, and then invest 10% into assets. And an asset, to me, here's a simple rule. Assets feed you, liabilities bleed you. Assets put money in your account, liabilities take money out. So a lot of times people are selling us assets that cost us money every month. That's why you end up with big houses and expensive cars. Oh, these are great assets. Not an asset, that's a liability. It's taking money out of my account every month. And if I'm investing in liabilities, and especially if I'm taking out a loan to buy a liability, like a house, all of a sudden I can find myself in that losing loop very, very easily. So this is where, all right, 10%, we're going to pay that down, and we're going to take 10% where we're actually putting it in things like dividend producing stocks, real estate or real estate equivalents, do REITs, get someone to manage an account, buy ETFs, whatever. Like, I'm putting it into things that are going to start paying me. And eventually, this is what's going to happen. Eventually, you're not going to have liabilities paying your expenses. You're going to have your assets paying for your expenses. And so the wealthy, their account looks a little differently. They have their income going right down here to buy more assets, and those assets are paying for their expenses. They don't actually use their time to pay for their expenses. Eventually you have enough assets to where it's covering all your expenses, and that's when you've hit infinity. When we say infinity investing, a book I wrote, which, by the way, all you have to do is put in the comment right now, write in free book, and I'll send you a link for infinity investing, and you can have a free PDF. You could buy it on Amazon too, as a bestseller there. It won a gold medal at the Global Book Awards. It's a really good exercise if you want to get good at these things and you want to become a good investor. Buy Infinity Investing, or get it for free just by writing in the comments down below, just write free book, and we'll send you a link where you can get the free book. But the idea is that once we are at that point where we have enough assets paying for our expenses, guess what I don't need anymore? I don't need income from me. I don't need this. I don't need to work because I have enough income being generated off my assets to cover my expenses. And then for me, once I hit that point, work is volunteer. A lot of people work more when they hit that point because they like the fact that, hey, I'm doing this for myself now. And maybe they want to buy more assets, or maybe they want to create a legacy. But whatever the case, it's very liberating when you have enough assets to cover all your expenses, where you know, hey, I'm not worried about this 4% rule or whatever crock they're selling down at the financial planners area, right? I don't need that. I have enough coming in off my assets to where I'm not going to spend down my assets. I'm just going to keep building them up. And it could be in the form, again, of dividend producing stocks. Maybe I'm writing covered calls. Maybe I'm doing notes. Maybe I'm doing rental real estate. Maybe I'm doing multifamily. Maybe I'm doing storage. Maybe I'm doing mobile home parks. Maybe I have ETFs. Maybe I have a financial planner who's putting me in some syndications. Maybe I'm doing private equity. Maybe I'm doing any number of investments that are assets that are generating income that allow me to do whatever the heck I want to do. So the number one reason people fail is they don't know those numbers and they don't live below their means. Like, if we really want to get technical, you end up in the losing loop because you don't know your number and because you don't realize that you are actually going into debt every month and having a negative net worth, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. How do you dig yourself out? You follow these rules, and if you don't make enough to allow yourself to do these, then you're going to need a side gig. You're going to need to increase that income. I said earlier, the Dave Ramseys of the world will tell you to lower your expenses. I'm going to focus on increasing my income. If you want to learn how to do real estate, we teach this, by the way, in Infinity Investing. You could actually go over there and learn how to do wholesaling, flipping motorhomes, not motorhomes, but mobile homes, things where you can get in and get out very inexpensively and make a little bit of extra money. Wholesaling, subject twos, house hacking. There's just a number of ways to make money without money in real estate that we like to teach, so that if you want to increase that income, that you could do so. You can make an extra $1,000 an hour in some of these strategies, and it might be enough to allow you start building up those assets. So those assets can start covering those expenses. So all of a sudden, you are able to hit that 70% number, maybe 60%, and you could start investing more and start building up those assets. Hey, if you like this type of content, please like and subscribe and share it. I did offer you a free book. Just write in free book. We'll also put a link in the show notes if you want to just go there too. But put in the comments below whether you agree with these assessments or if you have something to add. There's a lot of folks out there with a lot of great experience, and I love it when you share that with me down in the comments. So if you know of anybody who could benefit from this information, please share it, and I'll see you next time.